Life is hard. 5 top challenges on the Money Guy Show.
Brian, I am excited about this because we know that life can get complicated. And we asked you guys via all of our different social media platforms, hey, what are the things that you're struggling with? What are some things, some challenges you're facing that we could speak into that would hopefully help provide some light in the middle of darkness or provide some options in the middle of hard planning? And you guys responded. You said, hey, here are the things that we're having issues with. And we want to speak to those and tell you, okay, here's how we think you ought to consider approaching these different challenges that you may face in life.
So a big thank you for even being part of the show content today. But let's jump right in. Number one, inflation.
Yeah, this is a big one. And let's talk about just a quick little Webster's definition. Inflation just means the general increase in the price of goods over time. I buy something today and it costs more than it cost yesterday. We are seeing firsthand the effects of how hard inflation can be on our wallets and our purses.
Yeah, I mean, when we this isn't just our survey of our listeners. If you look out there, it said Americans 40% list inflation as a top concern for 2024. And I get it. I mean, I think about Reby and Matt and I were coming back from Nashville and we went through a Chick-fil-A drive-through. And then I was like, how in the world was that $34 for like 3 people?
Yeah.
I mean, it was just, and then a lot of you guys, I can't help. I will probably watch or look at too much social media. Y'all are mad at Subway. Because forever, Subway, you could get a foot-long sub for like $5-6, and now it's gone way above and beyond that. So it's not. I mean, I know we're smiling as you say this, but it's not uncommon for people to have a struggle right now in the fact that things are just more expensive.
Yeah, and realistically, if we think about this period, if we just look at inflation over the last 5 years, from 2019 until now, really post-pandemic, 2021, 2022, and 2023, peaking of inflation hit like almost 9%, or maybe even just a touch over 9%, depending on how you measure it. Those are pretty high levels of inflation. So we saw a really rapid increase on our insurance premiums at the grocery store, at the gas pump. So everything that we spend money on got more expensive. Well, now you can see in the chart, inflation has come down some. Now, as it's measured, looks like it's about right around 3 to 3.4% inflation. But that only tells part of the story, right, Brian?
Yeah, here's the cold hard facts. The sad thing about inflation is that, yes, we've moderated on where inflation is, but the sad part is that prices don't typically go all the way back to where they were before this run up.
That's right.
That's why it's pretty hard and devastating, and that's why I'm not going to candy coat this. If you look at what you can do, number one, and this is a Captain Obvious statement, but I'll put some color to it so you know what we're talking about here, is you're going to have to adjust your spending.
Absolutely. It's no different than if you took a pay cut at your job, or if you own a business and it was in like a down period. You kind of have to think about inflation the same way. Even though you're not buying more goods or spending money on more things, if things are more expensive, you got to figure out, where can I cut back if your income is not moved commiserately with that? So it's a tough thing, and you got to figure out, are there areas that I can lean out inside my personal finances?
I'd rather draw attention to it, because I know if you don't pay attention to the fact and start taking some form of action, the bridge to nowhere that people will lean into is they'll say, well, it's going to get better, so I'll just use debt.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a trap. And that's why, I mean, I've seen, and a lot of you guys doing great work out there on social media, where I see now you're doing like the meal prep, where I see like you've laid out the meals for the next week. Maybe you're changing the grocery stores you're shopping at. There are things you can do to adjust your spending. I know that seems like an obvious thing, but put in the work. And I know when I've gone through these periods where maybe like the Great Recession, or I had things not work out with the way a business was growing. I mean, look at how you're spending your money with the landscapers, your cable or your streaming services, all your subscriptions. Nothing should be protected if you're struggling paying your bills.
So then obviously looking at your expenses and what you spend is one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is, what can I do with my income? If my expenses are as low as they can be, what are some other ways that I can help fight off this inflation? Well, one of the things you can do is, if you work at an employer that does not do annual reviews, that does not have a raise process, you can go advocate for yourself, but proceed with caution because you want to make sure you do this well and in a well-reasoned, well-thought-out way.
Yeah, here's something. Let me give you some guidance on this because a lot of people don't come in and talk to your boss from you're owed this, or even if you are. I mean, because when I find out that people haven't gotten pay raises in 6 years, I'm like, they are owed a pay raise. I mean, who is not giving their employees an annual pay raise? But be careful. That's a trap, even though you're right. Right ain't gonna get you to the solution. The solution, what I would encourage you to do is if you could figure out an angle that you talk to your boss about and show the reasons why giving you a pay raise or taking on more responsibility or doing something will actually benefit both you and the employer. If you can create those win-win situations, I think you'll be shocked at how they will be very accommodating to it. I've had people do it. I've had people approach me in different ways, and whenever it's from a positive place, I'm trying to figure out, especially if this is a valuable team member, I'm trying to figure out how do we make this work for everybody involved. So just come from a position of optimism and trying to create a win-win versus don't go in there and turn and demand or make it a negative, and don't do ultimatums because it's already tough. We don't want to make it worse.
Now, here is a little bit of cold water. If you are at a place that maybe doesn't offer pay raises and you try to approach this tactfully and it doesn't go well, that could be an indicator to you. Maybe you should look for employment elsewhere. I mean, this is a difficult economy, and if you feel like you're doing everything that you can to try to increase your income, but your employer is not recognizing that value in you, it may be possible for you to go find an opportunity elsewhere. So don't rule that out as a possible solution. And then the third thing of what you can do during an inflationary environment, Brian, and this is really hard, but it's so important, is keep investing. Because not only will inflation eat away the value of your dollars today and the money you're spending today, but one of the best ways you're going to fight that over the long term is by keeping your money working for you so that you can also fight inflation that's going to happen in the future. So don't just say, man, things are tight, things are hard, I'm just going to cut off my investing altogether. Try to figure out ways that you can keep sending your dollars to work for you so that you can constantly combat the eroding force of inflation.
Yeah, a big part of get wealthy behaviors is trying to turn your wages, your time, your labor into actual assets. And that's why I can't have you take a side trip to cut that off when that actually is going to be the long-term solution to protect yourself from inflation and all these other things, is try to get assets built up underneath you so that your money can work harder than you can with your back, your brain, or your hands. And that's a hard thing to do when we've gone through an inflationary period, but it doesn't mean you just stop. It just means you keep making that an objective, following the financial order of operations, and then you will come out on the other side much better.
All right, so inflation is kind of something that's a little bit out of our control. We don't get to really control how things get more expensive as it relates to inflation. The second thing that you guys said that you struggled with that's really difficult right now is something that you can control, and it's lifestyle creep. It is the idea that as I progress along in my financial journey, as I have more success, as I get older, as my family grows, the level of my expenses steadily increases through time to where all of a sudden I wake up one day and the lifestyle that I'm living today is very different than the lifestyle I was living 3, 5, or even 10 years ago.
Well, and look, lifestyle creep by itself in moderation is not a bad thing.
Not bad.
Because there is a fine line between financial mutant and financial miser. And I don't want you, just every time you get a pay raise, 100% goes towards your savings and investments to the point that your family, your friends go, well, you should be successful at this point. But that's not what we're talking about. What I'm talking about is just what we've seen. There's so many people out there, and look at these survey results. 47% of Americans making over $100,000 or more live paycheck to paycheck.
Now, I got to believe those folks probably didn't start out making $100,000. And if they're person that started their career, I'm going to make up a number, at $40,000. If they could look back on that person and say, oh, I'm living paycheck to paycheck, that $40,000 younger version of themselves, how is that possible? Well, lifestyle creep is exactly how that happens.
Well, and look at this other stat. A quarter of Americans making over $175,000 or more say they feel tight, poor, or very poor. And we did this show. We came up with this content idea about a week and a half ago, and just to prove how this is something that surrounds us at all times. There was an article that came out in the last week. Look at this headline. My family of four can no longer live comfortably on $230,000 a year. Here's how much the American dream really costs. So I would tell you guys, there's a lot of people, without a doubt, inflation has been tough. But for a lot of people, I think they've let lifestyle creep get the best out of them because they're when you have a healthy income and yet you're still living paycheck to paycheck. I don't think you have an income problem. You have a lifestyle and spending problem. So let's talk about how do we keep and contain lifestyle creep so you still get all your financial goals fulfilled.
So what's the first thing you can do? The first thing you can do is know your why. We always talk about wealth creation has three ingredients. It has discipline, it has money, and it has time. Well, the discipline to sacrifice some of today for a better tomorrow is difficult. So you better understand, okay, why am I choosing to sacrifice this? What is that light at the end of the tunnel that I'm working for? Because if you don't have that clearly defined, it's going to be really, really easy just to give up on it and just say, oh, you know what? I'm not going to save for the future. I don't need to do that. I'm going to live in the here and now, and I'm just going to enjoy today instead of thinking about tomorrow. The more clearly you can have a vision for what the future you should look like, the more likely you are to stay disciplined and continue saving even as success changes, even as lifestyle changes.
Well, I think if you know your why, you'll quit moving the goalposts. Something I see living in an affluent community like where we are here in Tennessee is that you see people with their car decisions, you see people with going to a bigger house, you even see the private schools that people, and then they realize, holy cow, even with a very healthy income, I have created a lifestyle that's not sustainable unless everything is working perfectly. So if you know your why, if you know what money as a tool can do for you, you won't keep pushing the elements to get the bigger car, the bigger house, and all those things that maybe that just doesn't reflect and bring you as much happiness as you originally thought. And I want to talk about, so getting your why and your headspace right, but let's talk about how we make this kind of automatic. And one of the first things you can do is make your good habits easy, make the bad habits hard. And the way you make good habits easy is let's create an automatic investment plan so that there's no way you can screw this up. What I like to think about is I told you that lifestyles creep in itself is not a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with, as you get a pay raise, that you take a moment to celebrate, that you even increase your lifestyle. But how about doing something like a 60-40 split? Why don't we let 60% of that pay raise go towards the future and saving, then let lifestyle only increase by 40%? If you can always have that split where you're getting better at saving and building versus being better at consuming and spending, I think it's a much better value proposition for the long term.
Yeah, another thing you can do that will help make the good habit easy is figure out those little celebratory milestones. If you're not tracking your annual net worth statement, start doing that right now. We have an entire template, an entire tool that you can use and go to learn.moneyguy.com, because what you will see is that if you are tracking your net worth on an annual basis, it will reinforce the decisions you're making. It will give you the fuel to say, okay, I'm going to keep doing this, I'm going to keep doing this, I'm going to keep doing this. And if you can consistently create that habit over time, well, then it does become easy and you are constantly reminded of why you are making the decisions that you're making.
On the bad habits hard. It cracks me up, Bo. You and I, little age difference between us, but we share a brain.
Just a little small.
And the fact, I think we coined this term for scarcity, and what that means. And I want you guys to go on this financial mutant journey with us, and the fact that I recognize that, and I kind of already alluded to this when I talked about the 60-40 split. As my income went up, I would start automatically increasing my forced savings and other things. So I was creating a forced scarcity environment. Even though I was having more financial success in life, every dollar had a purpose. It was going automatically to different pots of money, to different goals. So when I was looking at my checking account, I kind of felt poor, even though assets are being built. And that, I think that scarcity is a healthy thing, because what you don't want to get in a situation, we've already kind of covered it, is somebody who makes a great income, but you're living paycheck to paycheck, because if you don't have discipline, that key ingredient, it will get away from you. And think about also when you're trying to build financial independence, if you're spending, if your lifestyle keeps growing, that's going to require a bigger and bigger pot of money. If you can add some scarcity to your life in the way you enjoy, you know what you enjoy spending money on that brings you happiness, so you can focus on that. But you know what really is kind of noise? It lets you get your footprint small enough so financial independence is that much easier to obtain as well.
I love what you said. You know what you truly value. You know what you truly enjoy. So that way you don't fall into that trap of buying the bigger car just for the sake of the bigger car, the nicer house just for the sake of the nicer house. Make sure that you're constantly reevaluating the things that you spend money on to make sure, oh, okay, I spend money on this thing because it matters to me, not because I'm trying to impress someone else around me whose opinion really does not matter at all. So the more truly you can understand your value metrics, the more likely you are to line up your spending to match those things that really are important to you, not the things that should not be focused on.
And I think to kind of ward off the fake it until you make it, because I think a lot of young people do that, is if you can know what you truly value, and then also remember that wealth building takes time.
That's right.
I mean, this is, I think if people had the context to understand, the typical millionaire is 49 years of age. And they've been building 49 years of age after building and working to build wealth for 28 years. So that's why give yourself some grace. Give yourself patience to reach the boiling point, is because it might take you 10 years to truly catch traction. And that's why we love to show this slide. This is very valuable, is to show why $100,000 is kind of the most important. Because look at this. But if you're putting $10,000 a year into investments, and you're making on average 8% a year historically, it might take you close to 8 years to reach that first $100,000. But the good news is, look how much faster that second $100,000 comes to you. It's almost in half. It's 4.7 years, and then the next 100,000 is 3.4. And then you fast forward out when you're about to get to $1 million. It took you just right at a year to add that last $100,000. This thing builds exponentially, not linearly, but you gotta take the time to put the foundation work in and bedazzle your basic life. Have some of that discipline and that sacrifice in there. Don't let the lifestyle creep take away your opportunity to let your money build and grow.
I love it. And the more you let your lifestyle creep, the harder it is to walk that back down the hill. So stay conscious of it at all areas of life. Even when you're going from making $30,000 a year to $35,000 a year, be aware of how that can happen. All right, so we've talked about inflation. We've talked about lifestyle creep. Now let's talk about a third area that we hear a lot of you are struggling with, because it's hard. This is not an easy thing, but it can be super valuable, and it's super important to get it right when it comes to money and finances, and that's money and marriage, and how those two work together and interact with one another.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those measure twice, cut once, because the right partner is somebody you'll go on this great journey of life with, and you'll build each other up. You'll have successes, you'll have struggles, but it's okay, because you're in this. It's ride or die, two become one. But if you do it wrong, this could actually be a big detriment, and it could be very stressful and create a lot of hardship in your life.
Yeah, and there's some analytical data that would suggest that two people working together towards a common goal can be more effective than one person doing that. Look at this from the Federal Reserve. This shows net worth by family structure adjusted for 2022 dollars, and it just shows what the net worth looks like for couples versus couples with children versus single individuals with no children versus single individuals with children. And this is not to say that you have to fall into one of these categories in order to be successful. What this is suggesting is that if you can get on the same page with your partner, and you allow that to be a positive trait where you're working towards common financial goals together, the picture can look beautiful. But if you flip it on the other side and you get into a partnership or you get into a relationship where you're not on the same page financially, it can be detrimental.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't want anybody to run out there just as, hey, let's go get married, because I hear that's going to make it easier to become wealthy, because there are so many things that marriage can be hard, but then you add in finances, especially, joint finances, individual finances. Are we keeping things separated? And that's why it's not uncommon that you find out 2 out of 5 divorces are typically caused by financial problems and struggles. And
deal.
I think there's a lot of problem in the world where we already know talking about your finances is kind of a taboo subject just in society. Well, I think it's also hard for relationships and couples as well. Communication is not guaranteed when it comes to finances.
So what's the solution? How do you think about getting a spouse on board? How do you guys think about getting on the same page? And unfortunately, and because you're listening to this show, I want to give you a piece of advice that I think will be super valuable. It's probably not going to be some fancy spreadsheet. It's probably not going to be this thing that you design that you show your spouse and say, honey, look at this incredible thing I've done. That's probably not going to be the ticket. There are other ways that you might want to make sure you're getting on the same page. And the first one is, and I think this is maybe probably the most important, is how do you find common goals? How do you understand what is the thing that you and I can both work towards together that we're both going to stay equally committed to? If I have a goal that's moving in this direction and you have a goal that's moving in that direction, it's going to be really hard for us to operate effectively and efficiently. But if we can both move together towards that same goal, it's amazing what we'll be able to do together.
Well, think about this. If when you're starting to date somebody and it's getting serious, yes, you should have the big conversations on children, religion, and that type of stuff. But you also should start communicating about these goals. Like, hey, when do you think you want to retire?
Sure.
And I will tell you, as a person who's been married for 25 years, this openness with communication can also be very valuable, not only with just basic goal setting like retirement dates, kids, and other things like that. It can also be as good and even romantic as setting like a 5-year travel goal schedule. I mean, this is some of the things, if you can just find common goals, because a united front is definitely going to be successful, because life is hard. There's going to be obstacles. There's going to be struggles. It's nice if you're laying the foundation in times of good to create a plan that should hopefully get you through all elements of life.
And if this is important to you, you'll make it important. So another thing that you can do is set aside specific time for money conversations. We see a lot of couples that in the front end, they do a great job talking about it. But then life happens. Then you have the kids and the jobs and the careers and the community and all this stuff pulling you in all these different directions. Make sure that you stay intentional so that you can stay on the same page. Because if you have intentional time, you can sit down together. That is going to be much more effective than that pithy passive-aggressive text message that says, you spent how much on what? That's probably not going to get you to the place you want to be. So maybe your cadence is monthly or quarterly, or maybe it's just annually when you do your net worth statement, but have a dedicated time that you know you and your spouse are going to talk about finances and review the decisions you've been making and the decisions you want to make moving forward.
Hey, look, we had some great, if you look at the content from 2012, specifically if you want to go look at the archives around June, there was some really fun marriage content with Bo where we talked about simple things like how much do you have to spend before you get permission from your spouse. That stuff's important for the conversation's sake. But Bo already kind of gave you, do those small conversations, but also do the big ones. We talked about earlier, a spreadsheet's not going to be the solution, but it can definitely be part of creating a good communication plan. I am the financial person. Big shocker, financial mutant here. But I always want to make sure that my spouse is up to date with what's going on. So we do have annual meetings or discussions about net worth changes. We use it as a dashboard. Make sure you're taking time to do that. You don't want to have someone in the dark. I'm actually doing some content, they'll be out there with the news organizations and so forth about the secrets that couples keep. It's sad that for Valentine's Day, we're actually creating content on the secrets that couples keep, and that's just not good. That's not going to lead you to success if you are keeping those type of secrets from your significant other.
Another thing that you can do is make sure that you're willing to compromise. Brian, just because you are the financial person. Doesn't mean that everything that you want and everything that matters to you has to be what happens. You have to also make sure that the other part of the relationship also understands they have a voice and that they can communicate, and you have to be willing to compromise. This is something I had to learn a lot in my first year of marriage, but once you recognize that, it's amazing how effective and efficient you can be as a couple if you're both putting each other's interests on just as high of a pedestal as your own interests.
And by the way, if you're married, don't be scared to go get help. I mean, I shared with you guys, it sounds like I'm bragging at this point, which I am. I'm pretty proud of 25 years, but I don't mind admitting around the 7-year itch mark, even me and my wife had issues. And we went and talked to somebody, and it's amazing because we're all, as humans, I think there's a little bit of selfishness to every one of us. It's amazing when you get a third party involved and you share your concerns, your spouse shares their concerns, and then through a third party, they kind of help you navigate what you're maybe not hearing your spouse say to you and what your spouse might not be hearing from your point and perspective. Counseling can definitely help get you through whatever those things are, because it takes work. It takes to build a healthy relationship. It's not something that just happens. It actually is something, just like a good plan helps you with your finances, a good plan and an investment into your marriage can also be very helpful and fruitful for the long term.
So maybe this is new to you. You're trying to think about, okay, well, how do we get on the same page? How do we think through this as a household? Here's a great thing you can do. Go out to moneyguide.com/resources and download your free copy of the Financial Order of Operations. Or if you want to take even a step further, go to learn.moneyguide.com and you and your spouse work through the Financial Order of Operations course together. Have the conversations around, okay, what does your employer have going on? What does mine have going on? Okay, do we have any debt? How do we not? Okay, do we need 3 months of emergency fund? Do we need 6 months? And if you guys can work through that together, it's amazing how much you will uncover in the conversation to recognize, I didn't know, I never knew what HSA was. I've seen that in my open enrollment. I didn't know that was an important thing. This can be a huge tool that will give you some guardrails to talk through as you're having this conversation.
And let me go ahead and give you the answer. This is a household strategy. Every now and then I'll get an email or a question from somebody or a comment. They'll say, what do I do? I'm on step 7 and 8, but my spouse is on step 3.
Nope.
I'm like, you're not on step 7 or 8. If your spouse is on step 3, high interest debt, y'all are both stuck in step 3. So I don't want you looking at your finances individually. I don't care. Even if you have separate accounts, you need to be thinking about things. 2 becomes 1. How are you going to create success together? And that's what I think the Financial Order of Operations can do if you understand, hey, look, if my spouse has a lot of student loan debt, how are we going to tackle this together? Because I want to make sure all of our goals, objectives are met. Just looking at your success is not a recipe for creating this as a household, and I want you to get through that and find success.
And make sure you recognize why it's important for both of you, because you want to involve both partners. Even if one of you is kind of the financial head of the household, if something happened to you, if you got hit by that proverbial bus, you want to make sure your spouse understands, okay, where are all of our accounts and what are the steps I need to take and what have we actually been doing thus far? And if you both have skin in the game, there's a much higher likelihood that you're going to stick to the plan, that you're both going to take it seriously, that you're both going to follow through on the things that you're agreeing to follow through on. So make sure you're not just running the entire ship by yourself. Make sure your spouse is getting involved with it as well.
Yeah, and I love, we just talked about marriage and money. And I think it's right that the next transition should be, and you talk about what creates makes already something that's hard even more complex. It's kids.
Yeah, kids, they make life a lot sweeter. I am going to contend they don't make it a lot easier. It does. It's not like you have kids and life gets easier. It gets better, but it does not get easier.
Well, we talk about the messy middle. I mean, it is one of those things where when you're not only short on time, you're short on money. And kids are a big part of this because they're expensive. They require a lot of time. But I do agree. It's always worth, when we're doing the country song and we say the days are long, but the years are short, to remind people it's great. I think it is one of the greatest things you can do. The fulfillment factor, the happiness factor, when the moments are sweet and good, there ain't anything better. And it's until you're a parent, you don't probably understand that. But it doesn't mean that there's not sacrifice and hard elements to raising children well.
And we've heard it from you. One of the hardest things that you have to navigate is how do we handle childcare? Now that we've made the decision to start a family, now that we've made the decision to have children, it can become incredibly straining on our wallets. I mean, look at this. Daycare in 2024 costs an average of almost $17,000 per year. That comes out to $321 per week. So if you actually look at the analytics, 91% of people surveyed said they had to make some major life change, either in their work or their finances, just to be able to afford childcare. So obviously, in the world where both spouses are often working, or that's necessary because of how much the cost of living is increased, figuring out how you're going to pay or what you're going to do with young children that are still in the house and are not school age is a difficult thing to figure out.
Yeah, my generation was the latchkey kids. I don't know, good or bad. I think that this is not something you can definitely do with the young ones and the toddlers. So there's not any easy decisions with this. So let's talk about what can we actually do to get people through this hard part here, Bo.
And the unfortunate thing is it's likely going to require sacrifice. I mean, 91% of respondents said they already had to sacrifice. So this is not a concept that's foreign to most parents. But what might those sacrifices look like in order to help with the cost of childcare? Well, the first, and this one is fairly obvious, but it's cutting spending. Where are there areas that we're spending money on that maybe just for this season we could cut back on? Maybe we don't need the gym membership because we're not going anyways. Maybe we don't need the streaming service. Maybe we can drop some of the other services that we pay for, because even small changes to your month-to-month budget can really help knock out some of these big annual costs that you're going to have, at least for a season like childcare.
Well, I would ask everybody, look, if you find that you're trying to figure out what type of sacrifice am I going to have to make, you first need to know how big or how small the problem is. You've got to triage the moment to see if your monthly gap is little, is this a matter of just looking at your service providers, your streaming services, or small little sacrifices with how you eat and do life? That's one thing. But if you look at this and your gap is substantially bigger, that's going to require much bigger decisions. And here's what I know about life decisions. There's all kind of research on happiness and other things. If it's better from a happiness, just like if you have good things going on in your life, you want to spread those out. If you have too many good things happen at once, like you say, this is what happens with lottery winners. They win the lottery and then they buy a house, they buy the new cars, they start, and they just more, and they just find themselves not any happier because they're stacking it all out. That's a mistake. So spread out good decisions and good things that are happening in your life. But when bad stuff's happening, pile it all in at once, because you want to get back to your normal state of being, your happiness factor, as fast as possible. So spreading out bad sacrifices you have to make over as long as a period possible, not going to end up in a successful moment. What I would encourage you, if you find out you have a big thing going on, you're going to have to make big decisions. Maybe, the car you're driving is too expensive. Maybe the house you live in or the part of the country you live in is too expensive. If you find the gap is too big, don't just sit there and poke around with small decisions. Fix it as fast as possible so you can get back to the happiness that much sooner.
But make sure you are thinking about all of the creative solutions out there that might exist. I mean, have you thought about changing your work? I mean, this may be as easy as going and talking to your employer and saying, hey, is it possible that instead of me working 5 days a week for this season, could I go to 4 days a week? And just having that one less day of childcare might be a huge benefit to your back pocket. Are there ways that maybe you can switch your hours around? If you have two spouses working, can you stack your hours so again that childcare window has to shrink? Or is there another job? Maybe it's not a job that you necessarily love or a job that you're super passionate about, but is there a job that you could switch to that might have a higher income, at least for this season, to try to solve the childcare issue? That might be plausible solutions, again, for this season to figure out if you could alleviate some of the costs and burden associated with childcare.
Well, I would, once again, approach it. We talked about earlier, if you have to ask for a pay raise, do the exact same process where don't go in there acting entitled to something. Approach your employer from the position of how do we create a success for both of you? And I know, look, I don't mind sharing. Rebe, who we have on the show, we love Rebe. Rebe's a mother. And she came to us in a very positive way, expressing some desire for, Fridays, it'd be nice if she had a little more flexibility so that her family could do things. We're like, we love Rebe. So we're going to do everything in our power to try to make her happy, but also to navigate that well. So I think before you just assume maybe I need to go leave this job, if you love your employer and your employer loves you, I've about said your employer's a lover. That was really weird. But if you know your employer loves you too, find a way to open that line of communication because the solution might be right there before you. So you get to keep the job you love, but also live the life that you want to live.
I love it. And you had already mentioned this, is there an option for maybe changing location? Perhaps being closer to family or being in a neighborhood with other young families with small children where you can pull resources, or even if you have to call in emergency favors, those might be solutions to help offset this childcare cost. Because remember, this is just a season. This is not something that will likely persist forever. It's just something you're trying to figure out, how do we solve this cash crunch that we're in right now? And look, I know some of these might be really difficult. They might be big life changes, but they exist for a reason, because if you can get through this, the light at the end of the tunnel or the grass on the other side of the fence will be better. You just have to figure out, how do I survive this very difficult time?
Yeah, and let's talk about what you get for making these tough decisions. Financial security for your family, but here's something I want to think about with kids. This is how important kids are. I had a friend who started making some bad decisions when they were in middle school. Their parents just up and moved to a different part of the country, not only for the finances, but so that their son didn't fall into some of the traps of where they were living. So not all decisions you're making for your family, because this is the child care section, is all about the money. You have to think about what's the life you want to live. This is, when my dad passed away, this is kind of the stuff I was thinking about. The way I was living my life was not going to allow me to set up to live the best version, to become the parent I wanted to be. So I had to make big changes. So that's why I know everything we're talking about in this section are hard, big decisions, but it goes beyond finances. This is the life that you're trying to build. So you get the memories, you get the family, you get to check the boxes on those goals, because this stuff is, paramount. This is foundation to a life well lived.
And how about this? As you're making some of these goals, what if this actually leads to the ease of financial stress the ease of financial stress on your relationships? We already said that 2 in 5 marriages end up not working out because of financial matters. Well, if you can make one of these difficult changes, like changing your location or changing your work or figuring out how to adjust your spending so that you can cover childcare, that might be one less thing that you have to worry about, one less financial burden that weighs on you in the messy middle, because we know that childcare is hard. We know that it can be a difficult thing for young families to navigate. But if you can do it, the big payoff at the end is a strong financial future. How can we make decisions today to not let this thing that we're experiencing derail our future? How can we let it be something that's nothing more than a hurdle, nothing more than a little bit of a speed bump that we can get on and continue moving towards our great, big, beautiful tomorrow?
Yeah, and this is, look, we're not going to be able to give you all the answers as one little section on childcare and messy middle, but that's okay. We've done an entire show that you can go check out on winning in the messy middle. Go check it out yourself. We've done a podcast. It was also out there on YouTube. This is how you're going to be able to figure out, how do you come out the other side with the memories intact and feeling like you did everything you could to not only build yourself up financially, but also make sure your children and you have the positive memories that are eternal and just give you everything, that all the benefits, I think, of having a great family.
All right, Brian. So we talked about caring for children and how much of a burden child care and the costs associated with that can be. Let's talk about the other end of the spectrum now. Because again, we asked you guys, what are the things financially that you're struggling with that you'd like some insight on? Well, it was overwhelming how many responses said, hey, I am really trying to figure out how do I navigate well caring for my aging parents. I am at a stage and station in life where now my parents are getting older. And maybe they've not made as wise of financial decisions as they should have, or as I would have preferred them to. How do I navigate that? How do I think about leaning into that? And what are my responsibilities as a child to having those conversations?
Yeah, this is a tough one. We've even done some Q&A questions on this, and we get all kind of feedback on it. Because, and I'm in this phase right now. I mean, both my mother-in-law is in her early 80s, and then my own mother is in her late 70s, and it's tough because just like you love your kids, you know your parents love you, and you love your parents. So that means that there's lots of areas for disappointment, miscommunication, and stress. Without a doubt, definitely stress.
So what are the things that you can do? What are the things that you can kind of think through? The first is, and this will seem counterintuitive, but it's so important, take care of yourself first. I mean, we use the analogy all the time. We're on an airplane. They say, put your oxygen mask on before you put the oxygen mask on someone else. Well, when it comes to caring for your aging parents, if you are not on solid financial foundations, if you don't have solid financial footing, it's going to be so difficult for you to try to take care of them, to try to lean into their financial circumstance. So one of the things you have to make sure you're doing is before you try to provide guidance and assistance, make sure you're checking all the boxes and doing the stuff that you know you should be doing in your financial situation.
Well, I would tell people, because I don't want it to sound as cold and harsh. I just want people to know the reality they face. And the fact of, I think about my situation where I have a daughter with autism who I am going to have to plan for her future as well. If you have parents and you know for yourself that you're kind of a financial mutant and you're in your 20s, but you see your parents, you're starting to get a clue that maybe they're horrible with money. I would encourage you, while you have time on your side, don't bury your head in the sand saying, well, this will just fix itself. Go ahead and just know that part of the reason you're a hyper accumulator and you're a financial mutant is because you're going to be building a financial future for the thought that you're going to not only take care of yourself, but you're going to build enough in the system to have some slack so that you can help out loved ones. That's why I don't like this is a tough conversation. I'm just saying, plan ahead for the responsibility. I mean, we've had conversations. I'm not going to say any names because I don't want to create any strange dynamics with family members and so forth, Bo, but we've had, whether it's us or whether it's with clients, with people who said, hey, look, I just know that I'm going to need to provide for this. And there's nothing wrong with that. Don't mishear the statement of take care of yourself first. We're just saying it just might take a little bit more planning to do this well.
And that's why if you can start having those conversations early, it's likely going to be better to set yourself up for success. You don't have to talk through it all at once, but don't put off having these conversations with your parents, because if you just keep kicking the can down, by the time that you actually have a conversation, it could be to the point where there aren't any meaningful steps that you can take. So as your parents begin to age, figure out, how do I approach this tactfully, and how to let them know, hey, I'm having this conversation with you. I want to know about your finances, not for myself, not for my own personal gain, but so that I can make sure I'm helping you in the way that you may need help as you age. They are not easy conversations. They are not comfortable conversations, but they are important conversations. And the earlier and sooner you can have them, likely the better they will be and the more prepared you'll be over the long term.
Yeah, and help highlight the positives. This is one, I don't mind being a little self-reflective in the fact that, I've seen my mother-in-law, she had the house that raised her girls, and she's now moved into a retirement community that's a ranch house, much smaller, and I've seen her kind of declutter, and my wife helped with a lot of that process. My sister-in-law helped with that process, and it was kind of nice to see them kind of addressing all these concerns. And nobody's talking about the negatives of why this is even necessary. It's just, hey, this is what we're doing, so she doesn't have to think about these things as much and has less to take care of, less bills and overhead to take care of. It was a very positive thing. Where I've had to deal with things with my own mother is like, she's getting the age where like I'm highly allergic to cats. My mom loves cats. I mean, she's got, I don't want to say how many cats my mom has, because she's got a lot of cats. And I've had to have uncomfortable conversations saying, Mom, I love you to death, but we kind of are at the point where we need to quit adopting more cats because I'm the one that's going to have to make hard decisions on what to do with all these cats. And I can't have them because I'm highly allergic to them. So it's one of those weird things. So don't let time, we've already covered it. Don't let too much time go, because time does not make this easier. The sooner you can address things, the sooner you can have conversations, the sooner you can make them positives, it keeps you from having to have really rough conversations.
And then figure out, as you're having these conversations, how can you triage the main variables? Don't get caught up in 100,000 of the little minor details of their situation. Figure out where the big issues exist. Well, here's a great one. How long do you have to course correct? Once you recognize there might be an issue, what changes might your parents be able to implement now to improve the trajectory they're on? Are there ways that they can decrease their expenses? What will Social Security cover when that comes? Are they eligible for programs like Medicaid? Or how much of a gap is going to exist either for them to cover, or if you're going to try to cover it? The longer you have to plan for that, and the more clear your picture is of that, the better you're going to be able to prepare. And this is a great thing, that if you are in a situation where, okay, I'm a little outside my depth, I've never done this before, I don't know what this looks like, I don't know how to help, this is one of those areas where it might make sense to take the relationship to the next level, not because necessarily your situation needs a ton of triage, but you might not know how to navigate that with your parents, with your elderly family members. So if you can bring in a professional that understands those situations and has navigated those situations, it might be a huge benefit and resource to you.
Well, it also, it's good communication is going to help, because as your parents get older, they become more susceptible to being ripped off.
Sure.
And there's there's even unique behaviors that happen the older you get. I mean, we've had cases where you find out that parents are hiding cash and curtain rods in their clothes, and you just, if you can start having positive conversations, so the trust is built, and there's an open dialogue, I think it will protect you from some of those unique, quirky things that are hard and just part of the human condition as we get older. And look, and that's probably a great segue to share that everything we've covered today, these are all hard decisions.
Sure.
And look, this is I love the entire experience of being a human on this planet, and is that there's so much happiness, there's so much optimism, but there's also going to be struggles. I mean, nobody gets out of this life without having some type of obstacle or struggle. So the best thing you can do is at least go ahead and start addressing it head on. Mm-hmm. You know, everything we covered today, time can be part of the solution, but not ignoring it. Time is never going to be the part, whether we're talking about sickness, whether we're talking about building wealth. There is no part where ignoring the problem actually creates a better solution. So we've hopefully given you enough to at least start the discussion. Mm-hmm. Have a dialogue with your partner, with yourself, with your parents, with your children. All these things is just start taking one small decision today that will help you build your more beautiful tomorrow, because that is what's going to create success. So much of what we've talked about is just making the effort to make small decisions, small little incremental decisions, so you can live your best life. That is what we talk about when we're building abundance. I'm your host, Brian Preston, Mr. Bo Hansen, Money Guy Team, coming to you multiple times every week, trying to love on you and saying thank you for all that you provided us. Money Guy Team, out of here.